let's link up with Krista on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's up, guys? It is Coach Krista, and I am back on our latest episode of The FYX. Let's link up. I am thrilled to announce a very special guest that I have on today's episode, Mr. Drew Manning, who is also known as the Fit to Fat to Fit guy. He has done it now twice, has been on this journey of fit to fat to fit. And if you don't know too much about it, I think the name itself kind of explains it. It's very clear. He is a fitness professional who I will let discuss about his experience in the industry, has gone through multiple journeys where he's intentionally gained weight and then gone through the process of losing it and getting it off and dealing with the challenges when it comes to body image, mental health, energy levels, and all that sort of thing, and managing that in the context of his family. So a lot of cool things to discuss in today's episode. And with that, I'm going to give Drew the floor. So Drew, I like to kick off all of my episodes with my guests and kind of run them through like, hey, give me a 30-second elevator pitch on who you are. I won't time you, but just kind of add a little bit to what I just shared and give us a little bit of context about who you are. And usually I ask people, why the heck should we care about you?
Yeah, good idea. So 30 seconds is kind of short, but I'll be fast.
Yes.
Yes, most people call me the Fit to Fat to Fit guy. They actually don't know my name. So back in 2011, I did an experiment where I put on 75 pounds on purpose to gain a better understanding of what it was like to be overweight for the first time in my life. Never experienced that before. Super humbling, super hard. I learned so many valuable lessons from that. Ended up losing the weight, which is why it's called Fit to Fat to Fit. Wrote a book. The book turned into a TV show where we had 2 seasons where we put other trainers through this process of intentionally gaining weight to become more empathetic and better understand the mental and emotional side of transformation. And then, like you said, I'm doing this again a second time. I'm currently on the journey back to fit right now after gaining 60 pounds in the past 4 months, but this time doing it as a 40-year-old and with a different message.
Crazy.
How was that?
That was perfect. You crushed it. That was great. And that in and of itself leads me to a million questions. Okay. But I do have one more surprise question for you that I didn't tee up. And that is, I'm a big coffee drinker. All my clients, all my followers know that I'm like probably borderline addicted to caffeine. It's okay. I'm honest about it. And so I always ask my guests what their go-to coffee order is. Do you have one? Have you been drinking more coffee as it relates to, lack of energy with putting on so much weight? Are you a coffee guy at all? If you're not, that's totally cool too.
No, I love coffee. If I'm ordering out, like at a Starbucks, I'm a nitro cold brew type of guy. I like a lot of caffeine, but I usually make it from home and I have it every day. But I did not grow up drinking coffee. I didn't start drinking coffee until 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, really? Okay. That's kind of later on. So what prompted you to start drinking it? Were you like an energy drink person before, or you just didn't need caffeine?
Yeah, it was actually against my religion. I wasn't allowed to drink coffee growing up. And so when I left that religion, I was like, here I am drinking energy drinks and being fine with that. But like coffee's, quote unquote bad for you. But then when I switched and had that transition, that faith transition, I was like, you know what? Actually, coffee really is healthy for you. And I'm in the health and fitness industry. So I know that. And so I started drinking coffee instead of energy drinks. So I love it now.
That's really interesting.
So I'm addicted as well.
You were previously Mormon, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I didn't know that was a stipulation of the religion. I feel like there are a lot of details about being Mormon that are just kind of like, for lack of a better word, stereotypical that I think everyone knows, but that's certainly not one of them that I was aware of at all. It's interesting. I know you've spent time on previous podcasts and any other times that you've been interviewed talking about your transition out of that. Something that I think will come up later in the show, but I definitely want to talk about sexuality and sex drive as it relates to weight gain. And I'm sure for you, that's been a really interesting process because you probably had to deal with, ideas of shame as it relates to that in like a religious context. So I think there's a lot of layers there. I'm sure we could do a whole book just on that, right?
Exactly, for sure. Yeah, we can go as deep as you want.
Cool.
So I'm an open book.
Awesome.
Now, so.
Well, I'm excited and I really appreciate you having you on the show. So we got the intro questions out of the way. First, I just want to do a pulse check. You just started for the purposes of when we're actually recording this, you are into your second week, like the beginning of your second full week of the weight loss journey. You've done this once. So do you feel, I guess my first question is, do you feel like you have a little bit more of an advantage than you did the first time around? Or has it been harder because like, what you want to get back to?
That's a really good question. The first time around was a totally new experience. So I didn't really know what to expect. And it was very hard, very humbling to do the workouts again, struggled to, have the endurance to do the cardio or do push-ups on my knees. This time around, I kind of expected that. So I knew what to expect. I knew it was going to suck. I knew it was going to be hard. I am a little bit older. So, we'll see as far as like my body recovering, if that takes longer. I'm only a week into it. And all I know is everything is sore. Everything hurts. I'm really, really weak, I feel like, at the gym. And it's going to be a long climb back up that mountain that I just came down off of. But yeah, compared to the first time around, that was almost 10 years ago. Both journeys, are hard, in the sense
in
of
their own right.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think, let me ask you about your workouts a little more specifically, because I'll tell you on a personal level, just the year of 2020 has been a big mental health battle for me. I was about to get married. I broke off an engagement. Religion played a factor in the situation. So that's why I do want to discuss it and talk about your perspective. But I definitely went through a period of like really deprioritizing my wellness in terms of physical exercise, especially with COVID. Like for you, this was probably one of the easiest times to decide to put on weight because it was difficult to get into a gym. People were depressed. They were dealing with things in isolation. But for me, I really use that as, quite frankly, I'm going to be hard on myself, but it's the reality, as an excuse to be like, it's so hard to work out now and I'm not feeling like myself and I'm dealing with depression. So I'm just not going to do it. And it's so funny because when you are depressed, that's the number one thing you should do is move, right?
Exactly.
But it feels so difficult in the moment. And so I really understand your process of your mindset of trying to empathize with your clients, because I'll tell you, I have clients who told me now, like I just onboarded a new client a month ago and she said, she was like, this is going to sound so twisted, but it makes me feel so much better that you told me you dabbled with and dealt with depression because I just assumed you were this very untouchable person. And I was open about it too, right? And I think that's the difference of what she was trying to say, because she was saying like, you showed your humanity, you showed that you're not this like super fit person who like nothing gets to you, right? And I was super open about the experience and I will continue to talk about it because I think that's part of the therapy. But I know exactly what you mean of like the idea of having to do push-ups on your knees. So when you knew you could do like a snatch with a half burpee and a clean and like all this crazy shit for Instagram and you're like, well, where did that go? Yeah. So what I want to know from your perspective is, let's talk about it in terms of age. Are you noticing this quickly that like with only a week of workouts, is there a difference in the fact that you're now 10 years older that you can already kind of anticipate your recovery might be slower or your ability to get back to a certain lift as quickly at a specific weight is going to be challenged by the fact that you're now almost a decade older?
I'm sure there will be. And that's what I'm really interested to find out. Like as I go throughout this journey, as I start doing the workouts, like, how long does it take me to recover? Where were my maxes at back then versus now? I when I started this journey, I was in different shape than I was back then. When I started that journey, I was more of like a, kind of a bodybuilder style workouts versus now I'm more into like functional fitness. And I just finished running a 100-mile run like a couple months before I started.
I saw that. Yeah.
And so different. And I was about 12 pounds less than I was starting out this time than I was last time. So my starting point was totally different. But so I've changed, evolved, the way I train over the years. So it'd be interesting to see if I get back to the same strength level as I was. But I do remember from my first journey, it took me 6 months to get back to fit. And although I looked great on the outside, it took me a good year to rebuild my strength, like the same amount of lifts and or the same number, amount that I could lift before. So the strength thing takes time, but the body composition thing, my hope is that on this journey, I can get it done in 4 months. But that's the thing. I'm really putting it out there. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's what makes this whole thing interesting. Because let's say I don't get back to where I was. Am I a failure? Is this whole thing a failure? I look at it as no, because it just shows I'm human. And hey, when we're older, things change. Our metabolism changes, our hormones change. And that's okay. That's just part of the process. But guess what? It doesn't mean it's impossible. Like we can still do hard things even as a 40-year-old, you know?
Of course, of course. It might just take a little bit more of not even effort, I'd say. I think your why has to become different, right?
Yep.
I think that by the time you are 40 years old, and this just goes to your point about what you said, how your training style has changed. I imagine that 20-something, 30-something-year-old Drew in the bodybuilder world was probably like, a little bit of vanity, wanted to have a six pack, attract the ladies. Whereas now you're like, you have 2 children, you want to be fit for them, you want to show up for them. And also, you know, you get more aware of aches and pains that come with just getting older year by year. Who cares if you're 40, 60 or 27? Like I definitely see a difference in my body. I'm only 26 and I see such a difference in my body and my ability to recover from this age to even 21. Like if you're in tune, it changes a lot faster than I think people realize. But talk to me about what your why is for this journey beyond like you're just fascinated with the science behind it and trying to empathize, like whether that's tying into your family or what do you hope that in someone observing you going through this beyond the empathy, dig a little bit deeper with it for me, that they can get out of it and you hope to get out of it as well.
Yeah, 100%. One of the biggest things for me is like, yeah, it's cool to get back to a low percent body fat. Like that's cool, right? But the biggest thing that I missed during my 4 months of gaining weight and feeling awful and miserable was the feeling of being healthy. The feeling of being healthy is so underrated in our society because
it's powerful.
Exactly. People don't know what that feels like because their normal is what I was for 4 months. So like for me, I went from one extreme of super healthy to 4 months of super unhealthy. And then I'm like, man, I can't wait for this to be over because I want to go back to my normal. But I realized a lot of people, they don't experience my normal of that healthy of what it feels like to be healthy. Their normal is like that unhealthy state, which sometimes doesn't feel that bad. It doesn't feel like you're dying. It doesn't feel like you're going to have a heart attack. You can still walk and move and laugh and have a good time in this life. So for some people, they get stuck there. They're like, okay, well, what am I fighting for? Like I'm doing the hard work. I'm exercising. I'm eating healthy. I'm doing all these things that I'm supposed to, but I don't see the results. So like, what's the point of like living this hard lifestyle? Because it takes a while to feel that way. It takes a while to feel that sense of wellness and having that physical health. And a lot of people don't know what that feels like. And so for me, my why is, and my hope is for myself to get back to that state of mind where I feel healthy. And that's things like mental clarity. So like a clear mind, lots of energy throughout the day. I don't feel like I have to take naps or feel like I have to have a ton of coffee to stay awake, to keep me awake, or, you know, sleeping through the night, like having a good night's rest, best feeling in the world. You know what I'm saying? To have 8 hours of like really deep sleep and wake up refreshed, better digestion, you know, like you can just imagine eating 6,000 calories of processed food every single day, what that does to your gut over time. And people eat that way for decades. And I did it for 4 months. Let's see, you know, what else? Yeah. Like being able to do hard things, like the ability to, like right now I'm super sore. Like I mentioned, it actually feels good to feel sore. Like I can feel my body so much more. I'm more present in my body because every time I move, it's painful. But it's kind of a good feeling to feel that way because it makes you it reminds you that you can do hard things. So my hope with all of this is to inspire people and make them more aware of like just what they're fighting for. Like this feeling, I promise you it will come as you continue to live this lifestyle. Don't do it for the weight loss and like the six pack. Like that's cool. That's like the cherry on top. If you,
it's like the byproduct that's nice if it happens. Yeah,
exactly. But if you can just feel what it's like to like not have any aches or pains or fatigue throughout the day and like a clear mind and like energy and focus that like you've never felt before and good sex, like a high libido and like a good sex drive, like who doesn't want a good sex life? And that has to do with your physical health. And so 100%. It's all these other things that are part of this healthy lifestyle that I'm trying to describe to people of like, this is what you're missing. And this is why it's worth fighting for your health. Even though it's hard to exercise, it's hard to eat healthy food and meal prep. I'm going through that hard as well right now. And I think that's what makes this journey so different, so unique is usually their leader, their person that they're following already has six pack abs. They've, you know, less than 10% body fat.
Sure.
Like,
and maybe was an athlete, so they never struggled. Totally. Like, I think that's such a good point that you bring up. It's like, you know, the other side. And I think for me, that's actually allowed me recently because of what I have experienced and like I recorded a video yesterday and I was like, oh, like it was just like the wake up call that I needed to be like, okay, like you really need to like think about how you look. But at the same time, I just don't even feel good. And that for me was like, because of what I've experienced as being super fit, it's 100% based off feeling, because like I'm not sleeping as well as I want to. I'm totally relying on more coffee. And I think that it's just hard to put that into perspective because like you said, if you've never experienced what the goodness feels like, it's like, sure, like let's use your sex life as an example.
Sure.
I think a lot of people fixate on the fact that like if they're overweight, they don't have libido because they feel uncomfortable in their own skin. But let's take it way out of that context and talk about hormones. Like tell me about, I know you've talked about this, but to give more context, tell me how your sex life has been in going through this journey since you've done it twice, and how that is not a conversation that we're seeing in the wellness space. Like I will say, I'm proud of this because I have seen in the last like kind of like 3 to 6 months, I've talked to a lot more health professionals and nutrition coaches in particular who tell me that they include in biofeedback for their clients, how is your sex life? And I think that's awesome because I think like coaches are starting to think about it, but I don't think it was emphasized before because it's like a weird thing no one wants to talk about.
Exactly. It's a taboo topic, and I totally get that. And the problem is that we don't make that connection. People think, oh, I don't need to change my lifestyle. Just take this pill and that'll fix everything. And but it's a cascade of events. So like I mentioned, sleep deprivation. Like if you aren't sleeping through the night because of your diet affects how you sleep, believe it or not. So if you're eating, a lot of processed food and your sleep is affected and you're waking up sleep deprived and you have less time in REM sleep and deep sleep, that affects your hormones. So as your hormones shift, your testosterone is going to drop. As your sleep declines, your testosterone goes down. As your testosterone goes down, it's a whole cascade of other events. Your cortisol spikes throughout the day. You have high cortisol. And as those hormones shift, you start to feel a shift in how you show up. So for example, as your testosterone lowers, your libido goes down. So your desire to have sex drops. Your blood flow is different, so that's why a lot of people have erectile dysfunction, but we don't really make the connection of like, oh, sleep, stress management, diet, exercise actually affect that. So instead of taking a pill, what if we change these lifestyle things first and foremost, and then you feel like a kid again, instead of just masking it with a blue pill to fix it, which has all kinds of side effects. So like, this is the type of stuff that I'm trying to make people more aware of as I go throughout this journey, because I'm open talking about sex. The other thing that's really interesting, like I don't know how many male followers you have, but the female followers will love this too. And it's all good because I'm not embarrassed to talk about it. So a lot of people ask me this question, not a lot of people, but a few people, they say, what happens to your penis size as you gain weight? For every 30 pounds a man gains in fat, the penis doesn't shrink. It's the same size. Right. But with more fat around that area, it kind of moves inwards because the fat expands and pulls the penis in. So the appearance of it is shorter.
Okay.
Exactly. So around every 30 pounds or so that a man gains, he loses about an inch from an outside perspective. Like I said, it's still the same size.
Sure.
It goes back to normal if you lose the weight.
Right.
So to all the ladies out there, go tell your men this. Or
I love it. PSA, if there's one part of the episode you listen to, it's this right here. If you're not happy with your husband, tell him to lose some weight.
Exactly. It's so true. And a lot of people no one talks about this because people are, I'll be honest with you, the first time I did this in 2011, I kind of freaked out. I'm like, what is happening? And, had to talk to my doctor. They're like,
right. I was going to ask you to compare now and then. Also, because like you were younger, do you think even with like, forget about the fat component of what you're saying scientifically, but what about changes, like natural changes in your testosterone levels just because you're now 10 years older? I'm sure that played a factor too, right?
100%. I think my starting testosterone this time was lower than what it was back then, but my testosterone dropped to around the same levels. So around 200, low 200s is where my testosterone was on my first journey. And that's where it is now. Because now that I'm older, there might be a slight decrease, but I know all these like biohacking things to do to help increase your testosterone naturally. And so I've been practicing those, past probably 3 years and in hopes to, and I would always recommend doing those first instead of just not changing your lifestyle, taking a pill, getting injections for testosterone, but then not changing your diet or sleeping patterns or anything like that. So that's my recommendation. But yeah, interesting facts for everyone.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And two, even just your point about getting tests done, how important do you think it is for people to have better conversations with, even for like, forget their doctor, but working with a health coach or any sort of fitness professional who's focused on nutrition? Do you think that a lot of coaches out there are kind of missing the boat in terms of asking their clients, like, hey, let me see your blood work. Hey, let me see X, Y, and Z? Because talk to me about how you've incorporated tracking that information so that you can now paint a better picture when you go through the process of losing the weight.
Yeah, I think this is really hard for people when they come into a physical transformation.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's just going to be physical. Like, hey, what are my calories? What are my macros? What supplements do I take? What exercises do I do? And then if I do that, that'll fix the physical part of me. But in reality, and then they go to a therapist and they talk about the mental and emotional stuff that they're going through, and that's all they focus on over there.
Right.
And blood work, they only talk to their doctor about that stuff instead
Mm-hmm.
of maybe moving forward, there's an opportunity for certain types of coaches to be educated in all those areas, not to be an expert necessarily, but to be able to understand them to the point of, hey, your blood work showing this, and maybe there's some things we can do nutrition wise, sleep wise, exercise wise to help increase that. So let's do some blood work, get a baseline, see where your numbers are at, work with me for 3 or 4 months, see what we can get those numbers up to, and see if these kinds of things make any changes. And most likely you're going to see, if you have someone that understands certain markers in your blood of what to look for, what not to look for. Because some doctors, they know all about blood work and they know how to prescribe
but they're not
pills.
looking for what somebody else could miss, right? Like, or they can miss something that, like, a great example is, like, I'm sure you know all of these guys. Like, I just went through Jason Phillips' Nutrition Coaching Institute, and his main coach who discusses the nutrition component, Travis, he was talking about, he's in med school, and he was telling us that he has seen that, and this is just a hot topic with infertility and IVF for women. He has had friends and just women who come to him who have spent ungodly amounts of money, hundreds of $1,000s trying to get IVF. It doesn't work. And he's like, hey, can I see your lab work? He changes like 5 or 6 things of their diet, and in 6 months they get pregnant.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I believe that. That's why maybe that moving forward, that's kind of like the trainer of the future or the coach of the future, or someone that's well-versed, even on the mental and emotional side too. Like, if you're not really understanding, like, hey, what is it that's keeping you back from being consistent? Like, you could give someone the perfect meal plan, the perfect supplement protocol, the perfect workout, and all those changes. But if they don't understand what emotionally is keeping them from doing these things on a consistent basis, it's all going to be for naught, because they can't quite figure that part out yet. They try and just willpower their way to doing the plan perfectly that their trainer gave them without really understanding themselves on a deeper level of, like, oh, I get it now. Because of this past trauma, I gravitate towards food to mask that pain that I feel when these triggers come up, when these emotional triggers happen in my life, when my husband and I get in a fight, or when my kids, are doing this, or when, the finances are a big issue. When those triggers happen, your emotions are all over the place, and it's not a matter of willpower anymore. It's a matter of how you've wired your brain the past 20, 30, 40 years to reach for the wine or the drugs or the food or porn or sex or social media, whatever it is that numbs that pain temporarily. And then you feel that guilt and shame of, like, why did I do that? I can't understand why I can't just, and then you beat yourself up even more, and you feel that shame, and then you think you're a failure. And then until you figure that part out, that emotional part out, and learn how to release it, it'll just keep coming up eventually.
And that right there is the reason why the diet industry is a $1 billion industry, because people have to keep coming back again and again looking for other things. Because I can't tell you how many clients I have, and this was going back to my point earlier about making me feel like what I've been through has made me a better coach. And I'm sure you could say the same. I have more clients now, and this is on me because I ask them different questions. Like, when they summarize how their week was, I ask them to write down 3 positive affirmations. I ask them to write down, like, are you practicing journaling? And then I even ask them to do like a food log, where if they do find themselves in like a binge eating situation, before or after they binge, they have to write down, what environment was I in? What am I thinking about right now? Did I just get in an argument with somebody? Who's around me? All that sort of stuff. And when I asked them the following week, like, hey, what did you do that was successful for your week? 9 times out of 10, if they're taking those practices to the next level, it's never about the food. It's them saying to me, like, you know what? The best thing I did this week was journal every day and practice gratitude, because it made me think twice about that time at 2:00 in the morning when I was like up doing like this project for work and I really wanted to have like a Reese's peanut butter cup or whatever it was. And I think that that is so important and really missing still from a lot of the conversations, and hopefully with the type of work that you're doing, because you are willing to bring that up and get people to talk about it. I think your point about everything happening in isolation is probably the issue, right? Like, you can go to your therapist for this, your doctor for that, but if there isn't one person that can kind of like step back for you and have you tie all of those things together, you almost kind of miss it because you think you're doing all this great self-work, and you are, it's just not all aligning to one purpose or one ultimate goal, right?
Yep. I agree with that.
Yeah. So let's move into a little bit more about away from like the science and everything and talk about kids, because like we talked about before we started recording, I do have a lot of my clientele and followers who have children. And the biggest thing that I see with many of my clients, even the reason why they come to me, is twofold. Most of them are moms. And a lot of them tell me that they just don't have time to put themselves first, down to the point where it's like they will cook all of their family's dinner before theirs. And then they wind up being so hungry that they'll just like pick off their plates and make bad decisions. And I'm sure you're laughing because like you can relate to this on many levels, right? So talk to me about how, I know the first time you went through your Fit to Fat to Fit journey, I'm assuming you might have only had one child and she was probably a baby, correct? If I do the math correctly.
They were both alive. It was 2 years old and a newborn.
Okay. So you have had like both ends of the spectrum. So I want to talk about both experiences. First, let's talk about what it was like to have a newborn and a very small toddler and trying to balance being fit. Then talk to me about what it was like to have a child that young and probably already dealing with sleep deprivation, regardless of what you were putting your body through that was messing with your quality of sleep. And then once we talk about that, we'll get into, now that they're older, what that interaction has been like for you, because they can totally absorb what you're doing.
Yeah. So the first time around I was married, so I had a spouse that would, help me around the house or help me make food for them. And I could control what they ate because they didn't really ask, they didn't really ask for certain types of food. It was like, hey, here's your food, eat it. And so that component was a lot easier. I could focus on my food. My wife at the time would help me make, either sometimes I would cook for her and the kids, or sometimes she would just make her food, for her and the kids. And so they didn't really ask for like, hey, we want this junk food. This time around, they were 9 and 11. I'm divorced. I was in a relationship at the beginning of this journey, not anymore. That's a whole nother conversation. But just kind of comparing the two journeys, I didn't have someone to help me make dinner for my daughters. And so when I had my daughters, in the beginning, I tried to be like, all right, here's your food. So I had to grocery shop and meal prep for them. And then I had a grocery shop for me as well, saying, okay, here's all my junk food. And of course they want that food. Like they're 9 and 11. Of course,
it's in the environment too. It's around.
Exactly. What kid wouldn't want
Doesn't
that?
Want that.
So before we started the journey, me and my ex-wife and my girlfriend at the time, we sat down and tried to come up with some boundaries of like, all right, the girls are going to ask for the food. At their mom's house, she's not a health nut like I am. So she doesn't really feed them super healthy, but she feeds them healthy-ish foods. But she's not super strict. Like I'm a little bit more strict, but I do allow room for a treat every now and then. So I said, hey, the deal is you can pick one treat for the day, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You can have one treat, whether it's my food or something from the pantry, and that's your treat for the day. But you have to agree to eat the other food that I make you. And so in the beginning, I did that. As the journey went on, and this journey became harder for me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, going through a breakup in early November, and the depression and the sadness that I felt from that, the ability to meal prep for my daughters and make my food got to the point where it was just too much for me to handle. Yeah. And I'm like, I can't do everything. Like I'm hurting inside. At the end of the day, who cares if my kids eat mac and cheese for a little bit, for a period of time? Like I'm too exhausted to, be there for them and make them food and to take care of their health. And then also eat this junk food that sometimes I didn't want to eat, but also sometimes emotional eating for me in those moments was like saves me because
Totally.
it gave me that little dopamine hit,
Yeah.
multiple times throughout the day to make me
Right.
feel a little bit happy.
Especially in
Versus,
going through like a breakup too. Like that was this for me personally, that was such a source of like my body composition changes this year because I was just like, it's like the classic case of like a girl crying eating ice cream, but it's like, no, it's like you are fixated on this because you're in isolation with COVID. It's all you're thinking about. You don't have a lot to distract you because there's not like activities you can go out and do. And in your case, you weren't even exercising. So you really didn't have anything that could distract you. So then it's like, well, what's like within my reach? And like for me, I would literally just like open the jar of peanut butter and like I would never do that like with what I know about my nutrition because I know that's such a trigger. Like we all like you never should be eating out of the bag. Like you never should be like the things that you learn as a nutrition coach and want to teach people, right? But in that moment, it's the only thing that's going to make you feel better.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I'm not condoning the behavior.
Right.
I can empathize and understand why some people times of life, like the ice cream, the wine, man, that little dopamine hit, it makes you feel good and numbs the pain temporarily. Obviously, it's a thing that also makes you feel horrible a few hours later because you ate the whole pint of ice cream, and it does make you feel great. But it's this vicious cycle that people get stuck in of like, I'm sad, I'm lonely, I'm depressed, life's hard, stresses, finances, like whatever it is. And for people, food it's a legal substance, right? It's not illegal like drugs are, which can do the same thing. So I see why a lot of people gravitate towards food. But once you create that habit, once you wire your brain to think that way and to program it that way, it's really, really hard to break. For me, I'm only a week, a little over a week in. The cravings, those first 2 weeks are super intense and the emotions are still there. I still feel the emotional toll of life. And
it's not like your life stopped because you gained weight, right?
And I'm sorry, but salmon and broccoli just don't do the same thing as like Ben and Jerry's, Netflix and chill, dairy-free ice cream, which was my favorite thing. Or Cinnamon Toast Crunch or whatever these other foods that I love. It just doesn't do the same thing. And so I can empathize it. It's hard. I'm doing it because I know thousands of people are doing this journey with me and they're going through the same struggles. So I want them to know I'm going through the same struggle and hey, we can do hard things and we're going to do this together. Like I'll hold your hand. I'll struggle along with you, but I promise you we can make it through this. And so for me, that's kind of, that's kind of what I've learned. And, what was your original question?
No, you're totally fine. I got some more ideas out of that conversation. I think we're gonna have to blend. I was talking more about in the context of your kids and like you were just walking me through how it got easier to just kind of be like, here you go, like eat this. And I think that speaks to the point of like, we, as someone who is a health professional and very consciously aware of what they're consuming, I think a lot of times it's very easy to like scoff at this idea that people will just like go get fast food and feed it to their family, right? But in the moment of what you were just describing, where, as I said, like your life didn't stop just because you were gaining weight. You were dealing with that, with being a single parent. And that alone is such a transition for people. And I think even, being the sole breadwinner now because of COVID is a lot of like situations for people. And so they convince themselves in their mind, one, this is easier because they don't have the time. And two, they might think it's cheaper, but like that's a whole other conversation about how like people can actually spend more money going that route because of the way it's marketed, right? But I think like it's honest. And I think your point about like that dopamine hit, it just feels good. And we make so many decisions in our lives off of what feels good, whether that's food, whether that's your job decisions, like that's how we operate. Like we're human beings and it's okay. And I'm curious, before I do have other questions about your daughters and how they fit into this, but especially as being females and, body image. And I do want to talk about that. But I'm curious now with your comment about like the salmon and the broccoli, when you go through these phases and maybe you're doing it differently this time around. So I'm curious if you do have a different approach since it's time number 2. Are there any foods that you like, are you like going cold turkey right away? Or do you believe in more of the balance of like phasing things out? And are there any foods that you just like love so much that are technically quote unquote junk food that you won't give up because you just like really want to have them?
That's a really good question. Here's the thing. My situation, what I've done isn't very normal. Like people, what I did in 4 months is kind of what people do over the course of 4 years or 10 years, right? So it's a slow thing for them. I think from a different perspective of that person, normally I would say, hey, no need to go cold turkey and sprint. But because of my journey of trying to lose the same amount of weight in the same amount of time,
you kind of have to.
I kind of have to go cold turkey. So that's kind of my approach to this journey.
Okay.
Some people that works with, other people are like, hey, let's work on phasing this out. But for right now, with the way I'm doing it is like, hey, if you want to do this journey with me, here's how I'm going to do it. And you can do it with me too. And there's power in that accountability of like, hey, Drew's doing this same workout. Drew's eating the same meal plan and I'm doing it with him. That kind of gives people a little bit more power or hope than versus like, hey, I'm just going to wing it and do my best. So yeah. Are there any foods that are so here's the thing. I think there's different types of foods. There's trigger foods that I know that if I have in the house, I will eat. And some of those foods are Cinnamon Toast Crunch, soda, not really beer, but sometimes any kind of like, sometimes I'll drink like seltzers, those are, if those are in the fridge, you're like, oh, it's only 100 calories, 2 grams of carbs. Like they're just easy. Anything that's easy for the most part, I can't have in the house because it's so easy to like snack at nighttime. I'm like, okay, oh, just a handful of granola
and then that, like what I said about the peanut butter for it turns into like the whole thing. So I think there's an important distinction here that what you're saying is these types of trigger foods are the foods that if you can get your hands on them, you won't eat like a small portion size. You'll just go ham, correct?
Yeah. Exactly. So those foods I can't have in the house. And for each person, it's going to be different. Like know what your trigger foods are, right? And get rid of those foods, even if it's like snacks for your kids, like because your health is more important than them having to have that snack. Like
and
they will
I
be
see
okay.
that with moms all the time. Like I can't tell you how many moms. So I used to work in a boutique fitness studio called Burn Boot Camp, and the target client is like a 30-something-year-old mom, right? Yeah. If I had $1 for every time somebody did what we called a focus meeting and they told me that they couldn't stop eating goldfish, I was literally like, get the fucking goldfish out of your house. Like you are the adult here. You chose to spend your money on that. Your child can eat something else. The goldfish is the problem for you. So get rid of it. Like that was one of the times where I was just like, I don't have sympathy for this comment anymore. You know what I mean?
And that's really, really hard. Cause eventually people have to realize like in order to make change, like if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you're not going to change your environment, you're not really going to adapt to that new environment. You have to force your environment to be set up differently so that you then adapt to it. So that when you want to reach for the goldfish, guess what? They're not there. You got to go drive to the store 15 minutes away, pick it up, and then drive all the way back home. That's way too inconvenient for most people. And so set yourself up for success, change your environment. Your kids will be okay. Or find a snack that maybe they like that you don't like. You have to realize that your health needs to come first, because if not, you're going to be constantly pouring from an empty cup.
And you can't show up for them.
Exactly. You can't show up the best version of yourself as a mom or a dad or a spouse or business owner or whatever you do. The best version of yourself is when you take care of your health. Not saying you can't ever have those foods ever again.
Of course.
But you need to be in control. Don't let those foods or those emotions control you.
Totally. I think it really speaks to the sentiment too. And this is something that this mindset got me into nutrition coaching in particular because it worked in my life. And I went through a program with a company called Stronger You, and they focus specifically on macros. Really interesting concept. They spent $0 on marketing and turned it into a $6 million company in less than 6 years, which is incredible. And it's all because of amazing testimonials of the 30,000 people they helped. And the thing that so many of their coaches preach is this idea that you can have anything, you just can't have everything. And I think that's the problem, is it's maybe this is just such an American trait, but we're so all or nothing that you convince yourself in your head that if you're putting it out of the house, you can never have it again in your life. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. It's just kind of you need to know what to do in the beginning to set yourself up for success. And then once you build the confidence, you build the tools that you have in place to get a little bit more loosey-goosey. It's the idea of when you first, I don't know if you see this a lot, and maybe this is another question about eating out. Yeah. In the beginning, when a lot of my clients first start working with me, I try to caution them to wait to go out to dinner until they feel a little bit more confident about navigating a menu, because they get the knowledge at home of okay, this portion size is this because I've weighed it enough times that I can eyeball it, right?
Yeah. For sure.
But then once they're 6-7 weeks in and they're feeling good and they're feeling like they could become a pro at this, let's go out to dinner because your life doesn't stop. And I want you to experience what it's like to go out to eat and be in control of the decisions that you're making, not just be oh, well, I'm at a restaurant, so I'm just going to do whatever. And it doesn't matter because it matters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's the beauty of working with a one-on-one coach. You have that person to really cater and customize the program, whatever, to that person, and knowing their strengths and weaknesses and what they're able to accomplish. Like, are they beginner, intermediate, advanced? All those things. And so I think that's the beauty of working with the coach to really 100% customize. And like, going out is one of those tricky things where people are like, I don't know what to get. I'll just get what I normally get, and that's pasta, or what I'm saying, oh, this salad should be fine because it's a salad. It's like,
right. And then it's like 1,000 calorie salad.
Yeah. You got to look at the macros and the calories and those kinds of things.
Right. So. Or then they're like, they convince themselves that the only way they can go out to dinner and make it work is to like go for chicken and vegetables. And I'm like, don't be so negative about it. Like, maybe that this is like a restaurant that you really love. So plan your day around that meal instead, and like reshift and reprioritize. And I think that's like, once you tell someone that, they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And it like clicks, which is really cool to see as a coach and is awesome. But I think the other thing that you brought up at the beginning of this question too, that's really interesting, is about like the timing of how quickly you're trying to lose weight. I think it's awesome and really important that when you set those parameters with people, it's kind of like the whole argument about alcohol, right? Like, something I always tell to my clients is like, you can choose to drink, but just know, like, yes, you can drink and lose weight, but it's just going to take longer. So like, you have to make that decision that that's okay for you. So talk to me about that in terms of like, you're committed to doing this within 4 to 6 months because that's the amount of time you put the weight on. But let's say you weren't having this like parameter in place, and you were more like what you call the quote unquote average person going through this program. How would you approach it? Like, do you think you have more willpower because of who you are as a fitness professional? Like, that you feel more confident to lose the weight faster?
Yeah, 100%. I've done this before. I do have the willpower. I grew up playing football and wrestling. And so willpower and discipline were like instilled in me.
Yeah.
And not to say that like I don't struggle with it. There are times where I do, but I know what my limits are. And so for me, the hard part with this journey is like, I do have to be more strict to see these results. Normally, if I'm trying to lose like 5 or 10 pounds or trying to get ready for a photo shoot, like I can have alcohol here and there. I can have some treats here and there, cut back here a little bit there, increase my workout here, tweak a few things. For your average person. That's why it's so different. And that's why people are asking me like, hey, when can we drink alcohol? When are we going to have a cheat meal? It's like, we're only 6 days into this thing. It's like, I get we want to have that. People want, what happens is they see people like me who are 10% body fat that can eat, junk food on the weekend sometimes and still be lean and shredded. People are like, well, I want to do that.
I want to do that.
And then, healthy for a week.
The problem is freaking Instagram, like somebody like yourself, when you had a 6-pack and you're posting a picture of you eating a burger, and that's all they see is that one snapshot in time. And then like their whole idea of what you're doing gets completely convoluted, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of the hard part is people compare themselves to all kinds of people that are more in shape than them, people that are less more out of shape than them. And then we kind of get stuck in this, this place of like, conformity. And we're like, well, at least I'm not as bad as this person, or I want to look like that person. But then there's no real progress or change that's happening. So it's really hard for people. That's why I tell people this whole journey is way more mental and emotional than people think. And so there's so many other factors. And sometimes if you just try and talk about the science or the macros or the calories, that takes out the human element of the psychology of what it takes to be consistent with a healthy lifestyle, because you're not factoring in, okay, are they struggling to pay their bills month to month and they can't afford these grass-fed, organic produce things that, you're putting on the meal plans. There's so many factors that go into it. And that's why it's not as simple as like, why can't I be like this person, be disciplined and look like that? Like, and so what I try and teach people is to learn how to operate out of a place of self-love instead of self-hate, instead of hating yourself and like, okay, I want to get skinny so that people like me, so that I'll like myself and that I'll look good, right? That's a lot of people in this industry. Like, I want to look good, thinking once I look good, once I have this body, then I'll be happy. Like, then all my problems will magically go away. I know a ton of people with 5% body fat that still hate themselves, that are still miserable, right? It doesn't guarantee happiness. So my hope and on this journey is what I'm trying to teach people is to learn how to operate at a place of self-love and to be fulfilled and love yourself now. Even though your body isn't what you want it to be, you can still learn to be fulfilled and love yourself now while you continue to work on a better version of yourself. Because I promise, if you're not fulfilled and happy now, you're not going to be fulfilled and happy, even if you get the body. And this is a huge myth and misconception in our industry is people think in order to be successful, I need to be skinny. I need to have 5% body fat and look like these Instagram models. Otherwise, society tells me I'm a failure, or society tells me that I'm fat and lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the big problem, that we buy into this myth. And it's really hard to retrain people's brain to say, hey, you can be beautiful and love yourself the way you are, but let's still focus on exercising and eating healthy food, because that is still self-love. Right. Self-love is treating your body with kindness, not eating whatever you want, whenever you want,
like
and not
your
moving
body's
a muscle.
Temple. And you got to respect it that way. And that goes like, if your body, this idea that your body is a temple, like what you're putting into it, and also the way you're speaking to it, like that internal voice in your head that you're stuck with all the time, is the most important one, right? So tell me to that notion. And then I want to ask you one other question before we wrap it up, to be respectful of your time. Talking about operating from this place of self-love, describe to me some of the actual tools and tactics that you're running your clients through to get them to think that way. Is it journaling? Is it meditating? Is it affirmations? Like, what are some of the things that you recommend?
Yeah, so there's a list of a few things. I would say the main things for self-love would be meditation, 10 to 15 minutes, positive affirmations on a daily basis, and a gratitude list. Those are the main things that I try and help people focus on learning to develop self-love. There's a few other things, but I'll focus on those.
Did you stop those while you were going through your did you, because I know you stopped exercising and obviously you ate just pretty much anything, but then when it came to the meditation and mental health piece, did you eliminate those as well?
I did. And I tried to
Was that hard
keep
for you
up with
doing
meditation.
That and going through a breakup as well?
Yeah, that's where I think I really hit those low points in my life during the journey, during the breakup, was because I stopped doing those things. And I could have kept them up, and I did in the beginning. I was like, oh, I'll do this. Didn't really have the same impact because I really didn't believe in it. I wasn't really.
So did just as much as your motivation did dwindle to stop cooking a certain way for your children, did your motivation for doing those things dwindle as well? Just because you weren't moving, you didn't feel great. Like, have you thought about that?
Yeah, I have thought about that. And I think it plays a big factor because I'm 7-8 days into my journey back to fit. And I already feel a different mindset, a different, more positive mindset, healthier mindset, doing these things on a daily basis. And so, I think they did play a factor for sure.
Now, in summarizing all of that together, everything that you just were preaching to me in terms of how you speak with clients and people who are going along this journey with you, how do you now have those conversations with your daughters? Because having someone who's 11, going to be 13 before you know it, and she's look at TikTok and all these things on the internet. And I know that your daughters they take video for you. It's not like you've shielded them from social media in any way. So how are you having these conversations at home to be having that open dialogue with them so that they feel positive about who they are as a person today, and that they're not feeling like this less than or lack of success for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think it's been a hard thing because I think, first of all, being a parent is really difficult because you're like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing good?
You don't know. There's no handbook.
Yeah, there's no handbook. I think, I'm not doing what my parents did, so it's probably better. But then you really don't know. So the way I'm talking to my daughters about this is they get to see firsthand what this type of a lifestyle does to an individual. So they saw me transform physically, right? They saw my belly grow. They saw me gain physical weight, but they also saw me sleep deprived. They saw me ornery. They saw me, a little bit more snappy, less patient with them. And they could tell the difference. They told my ex-wife, like, we want daddy to stop doing this because, he's not as nice and he's not as patient and he's not himself. And so they get to see that firsthand. And this is what we try and tell them is like, look, daddy's eating these foods. Yes, it makes him gain weight, but it also affects his happiness and it affects him, the way he sleeps, and it affects, all these things. So we try and educate them on what's actually happening when we eat these foods.
But was that eye-opening for you as a parent to then now want to share that information with other people? Because like the first time around, your kids couldn't communicate to you that way. So like, how did that make you feel when your ex-wife was saying to you like, hey, the girls think that you're being a dick? Like,
that's a good question. It hurt to have them tell her that, because they couldn't feel like they could tell me. Yeah. The hard part, I think, is also they're young too, to the point where they thought anytime I was angry or upset or yelled at them,
it was to at them directly.
They thought it had to do with my lifestyle. They're like, but I yelled at them when I was healthy too, because they're not listening.
Because they're kids and they're not listening. Yeah,
exactly. So
they're not.
Anytime I was angry, they'd be like, I hate this journey. I want you to stop. And so, that's so the interesting thing now is now they get to see this journey back to fit. They get to see me eating the healthy food. They get to see my body transform.
Sure.
But my hope is that they also see, me become stronger and me become, more alive and happy and, well, and, all these things that come along with being healthy. They get to see that firsthand, and I can educate them on, look, yes, daddy gained weight and lost weight. That's not the most important thing. Now I'm focusing on getting stronger. I'm lifting weights again. I feel healthier. I'm sleeping better throughout the night. I'm more patient. I'm, more able to, handle stress, and I don't have to be so snappy all the time. And so they are going to experience that firsthand. So my hope is that they come out of this, not getting to the point where like, man, I'm never eating junk food again, but kind of having that understanding of like, oh, if I eat too much of this, I might gain weight, but also it's going to change my mood. It's going to change my hormones. And I think they're old enough now to understand what that means.
Sure.
So that's kind of how we're talking to them. We're not making it about weight. We're not making it about body image. We're making it about being strong, like lifting, like exercising to feel strong and to be strong, which is an important thing in this world. And then eating healthy foods so that we have a better digestion. Our gut feels good. Our brain feels good. We have energy throughout the day, so we're not having to take naps like I was during the journey. So that's kind of the way we talk to them.
And how are you incorporating some of this on a day-to-day basis? Like I imagine that you might include them in the kitchen when you're cooking with them and that sort of thing. But do you plan on asking them for feedback? Like once you're back to the weight that you were initially, or at least close to it, like in the next 4 months, like just as much as they communicated to you that they didn't like when you were snappy or lacking energy or whatever it was, are you hoping that they will kind of give you that biofeedback of like the third party observation so that you can kind of like capture that for other people for them to really understand?
Yeah. That's, I don't actually have them this first month. My ex-wife took them for the first month to help me because of how busy the transition is.
Sure.
And there's so
and
much
this is
work to
probably
do.
the hardest part of the process of getting into the routine and everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. So not having them does make it easier because I don't have to meal prep 2 meals and grocery shop for 3 people instead of 1. So I will have them in February. By that time, I should have everything kind of like in more of a
smooth
flow. Yeah, it's a little bit smoother by then. And so we'll see. I think I did see them the other day, and the first thing they did was pull my shirt up to see my belly, and they're like, "Whoa, it's already smaller," So they were already excited to see my belly changing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they'll observe and kind of see how I am in stressful situations, and I'm excited for that part. I'm starting to feel like my old self a little bit.
That's great.
But in the moment, it's so weird because I'm like, well, this is still me. I still feel like me.
Sure.
But from an outside perspective, like if you ask my ex-girlfriend or my daughters, they're like, yeah, you've changed. And I'm like, I don't think I've changed that much, but maybe I have.
Right. Well, and I think too, like, kids are so honest that it's kind of like, this is like one of the best barometers to potentially get for what's actually happening and what they're observing because they don't have that sense of like thinking about their word choice or even the consequences of what they're saying, especially to your parent and someone you love. So, all right, at the end of all of my episodes, I like to do a quick little lightning round, like 75 more seconds of your time. I let the questions roll off the cuff, so none of these are prepared. It's just kind of based on some of the conversation we've had today. And then we'll wrap it up with your shameless plug and I'll let you go. So you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Favorite junk food that you had throughout the experience this time around?
Ben & Jerry's dairy-free Netflix and chilled ice cream. It's so good. It's got like little salty pretzel chunks.
Wow.
It's got peanut butter chunks and brownies in the ice cream.
That sounds amazing. Is that a new flavor?
I think it is. Netflix and chilled.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I'm like, I'm going to pretend that you didn't
Don't
tell me
get
that
it.
because I don't need to go buy it. I definitely don't. Because I know that's my trigger food. I cannot
really?
eat a whole pint. Yeah, I can't eat a whole pint of that. And like, no, I can't do it. So there you go. I will not go buy it. What is your favorite book? And if you, or podcast, either one, if you're more of a listener or a reader?
I listen to my books as well.
Okay. Favorite Audible, maybe a recent one that you've read?
I would say every human should read The 4 Agreements. It's classic.
I've heard good things about that.
It's applicable to literally every single human if you want to suffer less in this life.
Okay. Biggest challenge this time around with gaining the weight that was different than the first time, whether that was physical, mental, emotional?
The breakup.
If you could pick one.
The breakup was hard.
Okay.
That was harder than my divorce, to be honest with you.
Do you think that was because mentally, like what you were putting your body through physically, like you just so were not in a place for it. Whereas like maybe with divorce, you kind of knew it was coming sooner and like there's other external factors.
Yeah, my divorce took about 5 years to kind of finalize,
Right.
and this was kind of like more of like all of a sudden, like we were both in the heat of the moment, like fine, we're breaking up, and then it stuck, and yeah, so it was more like it was more final instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so that was
immediate.
really hard. Yep.
How did you cope with that? Like what, like if you remember in the moment, like as soon as you like were like, okay, we're done. Like, did you go eat? Like, what did you do first?
I changed my Thanksgiving. It was right before Thanksgiving, and instead of going to Virginia to see my family, I flew to Hawaii to be with my daughters and be in a healing place like in Hawaii.
Okay.
So that's what I did to cope with it, and ate a lot of junk food and a lot of alcohol.
Like I still think that demonstrates that even if you do eliminate some of these practices of gratitude and that sort of thing, you had enough of an awareness of sense of self to be like, okay, I want to be in a healing place, so I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right? Like even though you might not have like done exactly, you probably wouldn't have eaten all the junk food the first time around. Like as much as you tried to eliminate some positive habits, they still stuck with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I think that's amazing. Okay, let's see. I'm going to have you do two more.
Okay.
Two more. What is your favorite sport to watch? Maybe like what did you miss the most during COVID because of all the changes with the sports and entertainment industry?
Yeah, I'm more of a football guy. So college and NFL are both up there. That's pretty much all. I watch NBA too.
Okay.
When my team plays, I really don't watch any other.
Who are your football teams? College and professional.
So San Francisco 49ers,
Nice.
USC Trojans, and Los Angeles Lakers. I grew up in California, Southern California.
There we go.
So those are my
showing
three teams.
Your allegiance through and through.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And then the very last one is, what is your shameless plug? Where can we find you? I'll link all of this down in the show notes and all that good stuff. But how can we stay connected with you as you go along this journey? Because I think a lot of people can relate to it and really get a lot of value from it.
Yeah, it's super simple. It's all the same. So my website is fit2fat2fit.com with the number 2. And my social media handles on all platforms is fit2fat2fit with the number 2 as well.
Perfect. Well, Drew, thank you so much.
Thank you,
to everybody
Krista,
who tuned into today's episode, I so appreciate you listening. Hope that you got something interesting out of this conversation. We did cover a lot. And as always, if you found it fun, enjoyable, valuable, please share it. Let someone else know. This will be circulated all over social media. And this has been your latest episode of The Fix. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you.